Olaparib was approved by the FDA for the treatment of BRCA1 and 2 mutated ovarian cancer patients. The approval was largely based on a study that enrolled patients that had 3 or more lines of prior chemotherapy for ovarian cancer. Those patients were BRCA1 and 2 mutation carriers. The study included other patients as well, including those with breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and prostate cancer. The overall response rate in this patient population was 31%. And given that this patient population with ovarian cancer in this trial published by Kaufman a couple of years ago was highly platinum resistant due to the many lines of chemotherapy prior, the 31% to all of us sent a very strong signal that this therapy in platinum-resistant patient is really meaningful. As a comparison, any platinum-resistant ovarian cancer patient treated with standard chemotherapy has a response rate of about 15 to 20%, but 31% in the selected patient of BRCA1 and 2 mutation carrier was very exciting to us. And that's why the FDA approved Olaparib for the treatment of patients for these indications. Again, 3 or more prior lines of chemotherapy and germline BRCA1 2 mutation carriers.
Olaparib was recently approved in the maintenance setting for patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent ovarian cancer. And this approval really came about as a result of 2 different clinical trials. So Study 19 was a phase 2 trial that evaluated Olaparib versus placebo in patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent disease. There was a significant increase in progression-free survival for patients who received Olaparib as compared to placebo, 8.4 versus 4.8 months. Now, while patients were eligible for this trial regardless of BRCA status, the progression-free survival was significantly increased in patients who are BRCA positive. Now, the EMA approved Olaparib in the maintenance setting based on the results of the study, but the FDA felt that there needed to be additional data, which is really how SOLO2 came about. So SOLO2 is a phase 3 randomized controlled trial evaluating Olaparib versus placebo in patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent ovarian cancer after greater than or equal to 2 lines of platinum-based chemotherapy. And in this study, patients were germline BRCA1 or 2 positive. And they found a significant increase in progression-free survival with Olaparib as compared to placebo, around 19 months versus 5.5 months. Now, even though this trial evaluated patients with BRCA germline mutations, the data from this trial, as combined with Study 19, allowed for the broad label of Olaparib in the maintenance setting. So it was approved for patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent disease as a maintenance drug, regardless of BRCA status. The other important thing about the SOLO2 trial was that it evaluated tablets as opposed to capsules. So previously, patients were taking up to 16 capsules a day for the BID Olaparib dosing. And with this trial, the results showed that the tablets were just as efficacious, and now patients are able to take 4 tablets daily as opposed to 16.
So Michael Friedlander presented the data for SOLO2, looking at rather an eloquent analysis with time without symptoms or toxicity in that data cohort. I think really gave us good evidence that these drugs are not providing undue toxicity. And even when we look at the quality of life adjusted progression-free survival, there still seems to be a very nice statistical benefit of the use of Olaparib in this maintenance indication. So these patients had a progression-free survival advantage of 15 months versus 5.5 months. And even when you adjust for the differences in quality of life, this still held up as statistically significant.
Olaparib as a maintenance therapy has now been studied in a couple of very large trials. They were conducted in patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent ovarian cancer. What we have seen in these trials is that maintenance olaparib therapy provides a very meaningful increase in progression-free survival for particularly those patients that have BRCA1 and 2 mutations in their germline. The initially studied cohort included ovarian cancer patients agnostic of BRCA1 and BRCA2 genetic mutations. We then, in an exploratory analysis, noticed that particularly those patients with BRCA1 and 2 mutations did respond much better to olaparib maintenance therapy compared to those patients that didn't have germline mutation in those important genes. The follow-up studies with olaparib then focused largely on those patients that had BRCA1 and 2 mutations and showed that the progression-free survival was a mean of 19 months versus about 5 to 6 months in the placebo-treated group.